Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, our mission is to really analyze a defining week in the Trump White House. A week that, according to this stack of sources we have, is just a masterclass in political self-sabotage.
It really is.
So for you, the listener, we're going to cut through all the noise and try to understand this fundamental breakdown in their strategy.
Right.
Specifically, the complete failure to prioritize what seemed to be the central concern for pretty much everyone. Affordability.
And the stakes here are so incredibly high because the tension this week, it was defined by this widening, almost impossible gap.
Okay, what do you mean by gap?
Well, on one side, you had what the administration was actually doing and saying.
Right, their messaging.
Exactly. And on the other side, you had the public's, overwhelming focus on the rising cost of living.
So we're looking at a strategic failure. They chose distraction over actually engaging with the economic pain voters were feeling.
That's the core of it.
Okay, let's unpack this. We've pulled together a lot of internal documents, some analysis. And our sources confirm that the White House strategists, they were fully aware of the problem. This wasn't a surprise.
Oh, not at all. They knew, especially after those landslide Democratic wins in Virginia and New Jersey, that affordability was the issue.
A mobilizing issue.
Yes, they knew the ground had shifted. But what's so fascinating, and what our sources really highlight, is how they just completely abandoned that message this week.
So instead of dealing with the cost of living, they went on a series of, political side quests?
That's a perfect way to put it. And this failure, it starts, quite literally, at the kitchen table.
Okay.
The senior advisors quoted in our materials, they called affordability the heartbeat of the nation.
So they knew.
They absolutely knew. It was the unmistakable signal from the November elections. And this concern, it wasn't some abstract economic theory,
But this is real life. This is the grocery bill.
It's the grocery bill. It's the shocking jump in heating costs with winter coming.
Healthcare premiums.
Healthcare, housing. Finding affordable housing felt impossible for so many. These are the burdens that voters are carrying every single day.
So if those are the key talking points inside the White House, the critical moment has to be the president's public response to all that anxiety.
It was. Sources noted that when he was pressed on inflation, on the cost of living just last week,
What did he say?
he dismissed the entire affordability crisis. The report is he called it a hoax.
A hoax.
A hoax. And analysts we're reading said this wasn't just, a political gaffe. They described it as a strategic denial of voter reality.
And that denial, it must have had immediate consequences, right?
Immediate and measurable. When the polling data dropped, it just confirmed the depth of the disconnect.
So what were the numbers?
Gallup and some other polls that came out showed the president with just a 31% approval rating on the economy.
31%.
And our sources were clear this wasn't just low. It was, and I'm quoting here, his lowest effort on record on the economy with no close second.
Wow. And did they break it down by voter group?
They did. And the analysis noted that the decline was sharpest among independents and suburban women.
The exact groups that that had shown some tolerance for the political theater in the past.
Exactly. But it seems that tolerance just evaporated when they were faced with their own financial stress.
So the numbers really do confirm this strategic failure.
Completely.
The White House had two simple missions after those elections. First, focus on affordability.
Constantly.
And second, just seem like you're in touch with what people actually care about.
And by calling the crisis a hoax, they failed on both counts.
Spectacularly.
Yeah, instead of offering comfort or a plan, the administration's focus was, it was everywhere but the cost of living.
So the incoming fire they took this week, it should have been about economic policy, right?
It should have been. But instead, the focus shifted to criticism over this.
Yeah.
This flurry of self-inflicted wounds that just dominated the news.
And buried the real issue.
Buried it completely.
Which brings up the big question. Why? If your own strategists are telling you the economy is everything, why, in the words of one source, actively choose to change the subject?
The sources argue it really comes down to habit and a failure to see that the political landscape had just changed.
The old shtick.
The old shtick, exactly.
Right.
That trademark style of mockery, insults, high-profile feuds, it worked for nearly a decade. It got the base fired up.
But the sources are suggesting that the underlying economic pressure, the pandemic fatigue, it changed what people were willing to listen to.
That's it. The American public stopped being amused by the theater when they started genuinely struggling to pay for gas and food.
And this is where we shift from a policy failure to a behavioral one. A strategic breakdown. This is where our sources argue that old political playbook, the shtick, it stopped being a weapon and started becoming a liability.
The moment the magic stopped landing, that is the central argument. One source put it very colorfully, that the era of political showmanship that defined, 2015 to 2024 is over.
And what was once seen by his supporters as owning the libs
Right.
now just looks to more and more people like a pointless, exhausting distraction.
And the political result, according to multiple analysts, is the shift from attacking opponents to what they called self-owns.
Or on own goal.
Exactly. Unforced errors that are just embarrassing the administration. And maybe more importantly, they're exhausting the very base that's supposed to be motivated by all this.
We saw two big examples of this, right? In a week that should have been all about the economy.
Two huge ones. First, there was the scheduled rally in the Poconos.
Okay, what was the goal there?
The strategic goal was to pivot back to pocketbook issues, in front of a working class crowd.
But that's not what happened.
Not at all. The focus was almost entirely on old grievances, attacks on opponents, all delivered in this very agitated tone.
So the rally that was designed to be a course correction.
It failed. Because the president delivered what the audience used to want, not what they needed now. They needed reassurance, not rage.
And that failure sets up the second, maybe even more jarring misstep, the 18-minute Oval Office address.
Right. A formal, televised address is supposed to convey seriousness, command.
But that's not how it came across.
No. Sources who reviewed it, who saw the reaction, they described it as agitated and unfocused. The tone was, according to these observers, one of just palpable frustration.
Characterized by shouting.
Yes, shouting rather than presidential authority.
And how did his allies react?
Republicans, even some conservative media figures, they were just bewildered. They were asking, wait, why is he shouting?
Wow.
Or calling it the most meaningless presidential speech they had ever seen.
When your own side calls an Oval Office address meaningless,
Yeah.
that's a problem.
It proves the message is totally lost. It signaled panic, not leadership.
It really sounds like they were just battering their own instincts.
Yeah.
Instead of projecting a stable message on affordability, they defaulted to fighting these political and cultural ghosts.
And when the theatrics overshadow the substance like that, the whole purpose of the communication is lost, even for your most devoted followers. And that inability to maintain discipline, it created a vacuum.
Right.
And that vacuum was just immediately filled by this series of political wounds that completely buried any chance of talking about the economy.
So let's drill down into the specific examples our sources flagged as being the most damaging.
Okay.
We have to start with the tragic murder involving the filmmaker Rob Reiner. The president inserted himself into that very sensitive conversation, turning it into political commentary.
And the analysis of that move was, it was immediate and it was harsh, across the board.
How is it described?
Analysts called the action ghoulish. And they noted that even just from a purely strategic, political perspective, it was a terrible mistake. Leaving aside basic human decency, the political calculation was judged as a catastrophe.
Some sources suggested this was one of the lowest moments of either Trump term.
They did.
And the core strategic error was making a tragedy entirely about himself, and then, according to his critics, blaming the victim. Why did this one cut through the noise so much?
Well, what's fascinating here is the cultural reach of it.
How so?
When you target a figure like Rob Reiner, you're not just attacking a Democrat. He's been this prominent, beloved cultural figure for generations,
From the 70s all the way through the 2000s, a household name.
Exactly. So sources argued this kind of thing cuts through culturally in a way that is just profoundly damaging. You alienate people who aren't even that political, but are just sensitive to attacks on cultural figures they know and like.
Okay, that sets the stage for the next bizarre spectacle.
Yes.
The Walk of Shame, as our sources called it. Outside the White House, showcasing newly installed plaques of modern presidents.
It just seemed like a pure vanity play, right? At a time when voters are literally counting pennies.
It was entirely performative, a total distraction.
And the sources really highlighted the absurdity of it, especially mentioning the plaques of these obscure historical presidents.
It does make you wonder what Donald Trump really thinks about, like Chester A. Arthur or Franklin Pierce.
Right. It felt like a distraction from a history textbook, not a serious event.
And the crucial part here is the criticism didn't just come from opponents.
No, it came from his staunchest champions on Fox News.
And they said what?
They reportedly said, quote, "We don't want to see this. This isn't American history. This isn't what the White House is for."
That kind of criticism from your own allies is so significant.
It confirms the enforced error. They spent valuable political capital making headlines for something their own base didn't even care about. It just fueled that idea of ego over governance.
And then finally, the Kennedy Center incident.
Oh, boy.
The White House releases a statement trying to slap the president's name on the Kennedy Center.
The reaction to that one, noted in the sources, was just instantaneous and simple.
Which was,
Oh, stop embarrassing yourself.
it wasn't even framed as a political fight. It was just seen as another tactical blunder that took away from any serious policy discussion.
All of these external missteps, they have to point to some extreme stress behind the scenes.
You have to assume so.
Our sources paint a picture of an environment inside the White House that is, even on a good day, extraordinarily hard.
Mhm.
But right now, the stress is described as thick. The incoming fire is brutalizing for the staff, regardless of their loyalty.
And that internal chaos, it just creates another layer of strategic distraction.
Like what?
Well, consider the whole narrative around Susie Wiles.
She's an incredibly sharp, seasoned political operative.
Absolutely. But this story started circulating that she was used and confused and abused over some leaked comments about a book.
But the deeper analysis we got dismissed that pretty quickly. It did. The sources basically said, let's not insult her intelligence or her pedigree. Her political lineage goes back to James A. Baker III.
A legend.
Right. The consensus was if she didn't want those comments out there, she wouldn't have said them with the tape recorder running.
So the story of her being a victim was just convenient for some internal factions.
Convenient. And another distraction from the economy.
And the sources also highlight that this infighting, it isn't just among the staff.
No, the base itself seems to be fracturing under the pressure.
What are we hearing?
We're hearing reports that even at big conservative events like Turning Point USA, factions within the MAGA base are attacking each other.
It's just
In vicious, highly personal ways, so that unity that really defined the movement is showing these deep, visible cracks.
So if we pull all of this together, what our sources have shown us, what does it mean for their core mission?
It means the White House failed. It failed on its fundamental task because it created, in just 1 week, one distraction after another after another.
All self-inflicted political wounds.
Every single one. And they never got to the single message that mattered most to the American family.
Which was what the strategists knew from the start.
The price of groceries.
The cost of heating your home this winter.
The rising cost of healthcare and housing. They lost the week, and they lost the message on every single one of those crucial kitchen table issues. Hashtag tag outro. The final synthesis from our sources is just, it's unavoidable.
Yeah.
Republicans are getting pounded politically because the administration is focused on these tangential issues.
Venezuela. Historical plaques.
Trying to name the Kennedy Center anything but the core, quiet concerns of people who are struggling to manage their budget.
The White House had two simple missions after the election. Focus on affordability and appear in touch.
And they failed comprehensively on both.
The sources confirmed that the attempts to fix it, the Pocono speech, that 18-minute Oval Office shouting session, they were strategic failures that just made the problem worse.
They didn't deliver the message of competence or empathy that was so needed.
So the ongoing, almost existential question for them is whether the leadership can ever get the focus back to what actually matters to voters.
Or if that magnetic pull of performative chaos is just going to keep eclipsing the genuine needs of the country.
The sources seem to point to the same conclusion again and again.
They do. The cost of distraction, right now in this economic cycle, it appears far higher than any temporary political gain you get from a headline.
The public just isn't willing to trade financial relief for political spectacle anymore.
The trade-off doesn't work.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to consider as you process this deep dive. Our sources were unanimous on this point. Even the president's strongest allies are, publicly and privately, begging him to focus on issues that matter to the average voter. So building on that, if political leaders are consistently failing to listen to that immediate, desperate whisper from people about heating bills and grocery prices, the foundational necessities of life,
Right.
how can they ever hope to lead effectively on the grander, more abstract, national or international issues? What happens when the accumulated cost of distraction outweighs the temporary political gain, not just for the leader, but for the credibility of the entire governing establishment?
Something to think about.
We'll be watching. Thanks for diving deep with us.